English translation, 109th contact. Thursday, 8th of June, 1978, 1814 years.
Human children, you have rushed me far away.
It had to be, unfortunately. You see, today, the military is in the wider surroundings.
These birds have somehow been maneuvering already for days.
We will let you back down to Earth even further away. Look over there.
Man alive, that is, indeed, even further away than Schönenberg.
Sure, we were there once at an earlier time. It must be, however, because safety comes first.
I also have nothing to object to that. But tell me, girl, the apple there beside the viewing screen, have you stolen that from somewhere?
No, it belongs to my provisions.
Where did you get it then? Did you buy it somewhere?
No, not that either. It comes from the greenhouses of my father.
You mean that it is from Ptah's giant box, that it grew there and was harvested?
Definitely.
Uh-huh. Then you also have such fruits, as we know them here on the Earth.
Sure, but they were not originally native fruits of Era. The apple is from a tree, which comes from a progeny of earthly trees.
Oh, I see. So you have fruit trees that were taken from the Earth, which you simply continue to cultivate, and you also let these bloom and bear fruit in your great spacer. So what kinds of trees do you have then?
We possess trees, shrubs, and plants of every kind, as they also exist on the Earth. There are even various kinds in our greenhouses, which have already been extinct on the Earth for a very long time. But we have preserved them and have made them useful to us. Thus, we have all fruits, as they are also known on the Earth with you, and even several more, which you only know through your researchers of antiquity, etc.
That is fantastic. And how do these fruits taste today with you? Do they still have the same taste as we know it?
You think now of this apple. Sure, the taste has remained the same. It is perhaps even somewhat more intense than with your apples of this sort, and certainly much better in its juice. But all the other fruit trees from the Earth also bear fruit with the tastes or flavors known to you. It is just that these, as I have already explained, have become somewhat more intense since our robots and androids maintaining the trees work on these very attentively and also have great concern for them, as this happens with all plants cultivated by them.
And that apple there, it necessarily has to lie there if you do not want to eat it?
You do not understand him, but I do. Even very well.
I mean, is it absolutely necessary that this apple lies there so lonely and is not eaten? It looks so nice and thus appetizing.
I want to eat it, yes, but only later, when I might be hungry, I understand. Of course, sure, you can have it. Just eat it if you feel like it. Oh, how silly of me.
It is not so serious, girl, but I really was alluding to that. But I would not like to eat it right now, but maybe once I am on the way home again. Because by then, I could probably cope with an apple.
Sure, it should be yours.
Billy took the large apple and brought it home with him, where he handed it over to Guido Moosbrugger, who then inserted the apple into a glass of alcohol and made it durable in this manner. The apple still exists today and is still in the same glass under the care of Guido.
Thanks, girl. But now, look here. May I read this to you?
What does it concern, then?
A small excerpt from a book, written by a man by the name of Martin Buber.
Then you better turn with that to Quetzal or to my father. If you want, can I establish a connection with him?
Gladly, if Quetzal is also involved then. It may in fact be very interesting to see what the two have to say to this.
Why?
It concerns something specific.
What do you think about the writings of Martin Buber and about his mind games?
Actually, I think that he reveals a philosophy that is often very wise, but which, in turn, operates completely unrealistically, and even brings about dangerous errors.
That is of correct guy.
The connection to Father is established.
You wish to speak to me? What does it concern then?
I have a matter of concern, Ptah. Here, this note. On it, there is an excerpt from Martin Buber, whose literature you evidently know all about, as Simya Se told me just now.
That is of correctness. Let us hear what you have.
This concerns an excerpt from Images of Good and Evil, and it says, because the human being is the only known living organism in which, to some extent, the category of possibility has embodied itself, and whose reality is incessantly shrouded by possibilities, he needs, as the only one among all, confirmation. Each animal is established in being what it is. Its modifications are predetermined for it, and when one changes itself into a caterpillar or into a pupa, its change is also a limit. All of this together is what it is, and thus no confirmation can be necessary for it. So it would be an absurdity if someone said to it, or if it said to itself, "You may be what you are." The human being, as a human, is a risky venture of life, undetermined and fragile, and therefore he needs confirmation, and he can naturally only receive this as an individual human being by others, and he himself confirming him in his being human. Over and over again, the yes must be spoken to him from the view of the familiar and from the stirring of his own heart, in order to liberate him from the apprehension of being abandoned, which is a foretaste of death. If need be, one can do without confirmation from others, if one's own self increases to such an extent that he makes the supplements from others unnecessary. But not vice versa. The words of encouragement of others are not sufficient if one's self-knowledge dictates the internal rejection, for self-knowledge is unquestionably more independent.
Why have you brought up this erroneous and dangerous excerpt?
Because I also find it erroneous and incorrect.
And what do you think about it?
I wanted to hear your opinion.
I also will not withhold that from you, but I wonder what your thoughts are on this excerpt.
Then you should hear my opinion. I think that Martin Buber has actually brought forth very useful philosophical things, but that with these very serious negative values appear, which are nicely and dangerously woven into the good and lawfully right facts. But now, this excerpt, which was brought to me by someone, and who also underlined this sentence here, appears to me to be such an unrealistic view that I wanted to bring it up with Simya Se. I do think that the assertion is very wrong and dangerous, and to be sure, in reference to the modifications of animals compared to human beings. As I was taught, the modification does apply in relation to the animal, and thus also in relation to the change of its limit, but only in a relative sense, for an evolutionary change in the form of an adaptive change is also given with the animal. The change or limit is, thus, only set in the current course, but not in the future course. Diverting this fact toward human beings in a contrary to right sense seems so absurd and dangerous to me that I would like to have this excerpt be cleared up and clarified by you. I also think, in reference to this depiction, that humans are a risky venture of life, that it is quite malicious and injurious to creational law, that something like this can only ever be claimed, and
With that, you make a very clear and truthful statement.
where was I? Oh yes, what I still wanted to say. For what is then said further, regarding the continual confirmation, the being abandoned, which should be a foretaste of death, etc., I have the view that this is even complete nonsense. Especially the being abandoned and the foretaste of death allow me to come to the acceptance that this Martin Buber was ranked among the mass of human beings afraid of death because
That is of absolute correctness, regrettably, because the man could have done much greater and more valuable things if this fear would not have been in him. but I interrupted you. Continue to state your remarks.
Thanks, Ptah. The whole thing, in my opinion, boils down to the fact that Buber was of the crazy opinion that human beings, in their doings, actions, feelings, and thinking, etc., have to be confirmed always and continuously, because they need this, and can only grow in and of themselves through this. But to me, it also seems to follow from this that Buber was of the opinion that this was the only manner in which human beings could be upheld in their morale, which I perceive as totally wrong, however, even as crazy. The animal, in contrast to the Earth human being, is very much geared toward independently recognizing and acknowledging its modifications in every respect, which gives it the security of its self-strength, its self-knowledge, and its self-confidence, making it very stable. This is so because it is correctly connected to the laws of nature, and these surge through it in an impulse-related manner. Now, the human being, who has fallen away from nature, effeminate and big-thinking in his or her thought forms, has long since forgotten how to align himself or herself in self-knowledge, self-confidence, and in independence and self-cognition. Through this, he or she comes to the insane position that he or she can no longer be confirmed, and through this he falls victim to continuous low morale. But in order to make up for this, in his delusion, he commonly creeps onto the unreal path of confirmation by his fellow human beings. This means that he becomes of the delusion that he must be confirmed by a constant yes from the view of the familiar and the stirring of his own heart. As Buber says really idiotically, allegedly in order to be freed from the apprehension of being abandoned, which should allegedly be a foretaste of death. Now, I really ask myself, how poor in truth a human being must be in himself or herself, if he or she thinks and writes in this manner, whereby I cannot understand the whole thing because Martin Buber, on the other hand, brought forth rather real philosophical truth. Confirmation by others. This is just crazy and nothing but adulation. And this is only needed by human beings who still cannot find any healthy self-confirmation or their self-knowledge, their self-strength, or their self-recognition. Just because of this, so I imagine they must start to reap praise in order to find confirmation through this. If they do not receive this confirmation, however, then their morale sinks away abysmally. They feel pushed away, ignored, and neglected. In addition to this, they increase in ideas and feelings that are absolutely foreign to the truth and to reality, until, slowly but surely, a mania develops from it, which ultimately expresses itself in an almost hopeless fantasy that things actually are as they believe them to be. Already within a very short time, they cannot notice and cannot recognize any more that, as a rule, no change has been made by fellow human beings or has occurred with respect to the treatment, thinking, and actions toward them. They simply are not able to recognize this anymore, because they are no longer able to grasp the facts and the truth in their addiction to confirmation. Because of this, they cry out for praise. But if they had the power of a healthy self-confirmation in the lawful sense, then they themselves would know at any time whether what they did, thought or undertook was and is of a right form and right measure, or whether it exhibits deficiencies, after which they could then act in this or that case accordingly in self-cognition. If they are not able to do this, however, then they are still very backward in knowledge and in the recognition of truth in this regard, which, in turn, means that they deliberately resist themselves against the truth and knowledge because a certain egoism is owned by them and shows them that they would have more advantages this way or that they would be better promulgated through this. That is my view, Ptah. But now, I would like to hear your opinion on this, as well as that of Quetzal and Simyase.
I have nothing to add to your statements. Any further word would be superfluous because I would not even have been able to explain everything better. Your explanations are of very profound and true value, so no further explanation is necessary for that. It would truly be superfluous.
Ptah's words are of deep truth. I can only confirm them.
The entire teaching of the Spirit, aka creation energy teaching, proves the correctness of your explanation, according to which I can only echo the words of Father and Quetzal. From my point of view, I would just like to mention to this that, unfortunately, it is still very strongly widespread among the Earth humans to hold to old and unreal things in an egoistic manner and not to let themselves be taught. For through this, certain advantages can be obtained, and it seems much easier to live with these than without them. But this is a very serious self-deception and self-endangerment, which leads to personal demoralization and causes discord and destruction.
Of course, but that just does not want to be accepted. But let us leave this. For if Ptah can already be seen from the view screen, then I would still like to ask him another question, which has already been sitting on my stomach for a long time. May I?
Of course, but I also have some explanations to give.
Okay, then I would just like to ask, what's the deal with the so-called Munguzi images? And what is to be thought of the Frenchman Claude Vorillon, who calls himself a leader and réel?
Excuse the expression, my friend, but this Vorillon is certainly the craziest swindler in matters of alleged contacts with extraterrestrial intelligences. In his order of magnitude, he even surpasses Carl Michalek, Elizabeth Klarer, and George Adamski. Concerning the Munguzi images, there is only so much to say that they are based on forgeries. First of all, the alleged figure beside the alleged beamship is just a doll. Secondly, even the object itself is just a model. At the time, the man just wanted to allow himself a joke, but he did not count on the reaction of those who fanatically concern themselves with such matters. So he then also wrapped himself in silence and hardly lets anyone approach him in this matter. But now, my friend, I still have to give you some explanations, which I would have had to give you one way or another, and thus I would have become active in your conversation anyway. As a result of the analyses of recent weeks, all sorts of data have now arisen, on which I have to take a stand and give explanations. First and foremost, I would like to say that we were very thoroughly occupied in clarifying the possibilities in reference to your activities. As a result of this extremely thorough clarification, it has become clear that your constant objections are of the greatest entitlement in relation to the need for your use in and for manual activities at the center. Despite the long learning opportunities of various group members, the time period was not used in a decisive form, according to which the necessary knowledge for most occurring works actually is not available, which truly requires that you, who are mighty in the necessary knowledge, accordingly concern yourself with them, and that you give your instructions and also exercise the necessary control. Hence, your work area is the following. 1. In the first and most important place is the fulfillment of all works related to the direct fulfillment of the mission. 2. In second place, your center should attain the right and appropriate formation and should achieve good and maximized returns. Therefore, you should be responsible for planning out the necessary works and for determining the division of work. Thus, it is up to you to determine what types of work should be implemented and where something is to be changed, renewed, or created, etc. This should be your task in the second place, since you alone have the necessary and appropriate overview of everything according to our analysis. 3. In third place, you should transfer the responsibility for the completion of certain occurring activities and works to yourself, since you are of the conviction that you are in a position to implement these matters better in your own form and for the better use of the center and all those involved. 4. The final and ongoing control of all matters and works at the center and around our entire mission, which is in the competence of you all, should fall into your responsibility. 5. It is to be determined, according to the advice of the High Council, that you should henceforth take over the leadership position of the center and all related matters for the time that you are still alive. Thus, you should be determinant in the first and last instance, since you alone have the ability to bear this responsibility for the time being. You will have to give directives which should be regarded as determinative in steady succession. Non-compliance with these determinations must be sanctioned with an irrevocable exclusion from the group. 6. It is your responsibility in the future to be concerned about the succession of the center's leadership and to train the suitable personality for this once you are certain of this person. At the same time, your special attention in the material sphere regarding the factors of anti-materialism and modesty is valid, and this must be developed in the leader in a good form. And precisely in this relation, we must revise our traditional view toward you, for it now turns out that your great modesty and your pronounced anti-materialism are of very great utility for this task. For through the presence of the same, you do not tend on the one hand toward cravings for power, and on the other hand, you are thereby able to teach the suitable person in an authoritative form. But now, this also guarantees you to oversee financial issues clearly, and also to check over these in due form, etc. So we now recognize, through the most detailed analysis, that your modesty and your distinct anti-materialism are of very great value, even if we cannot approve of the fact that you and your family are often in certain need as a result of this, which must truly be brought to a change on your part. These, my friend, are the first instructions that have been prepared by the High Council as guidance for you, and that you should receive in full responsibility, so that everything will not still be destroyed. What is now given cannot suffer an iota of failure anymore, otherwise everything will collapse, and to be sure, without revocation. But so that this cannot happen, you, as the responsibility bearer for all matters of the group relating to the mission, should henceforth attend to the tasks additionally mentioned to you. In these tasks, you should also be decisive, in that the residents of the center and those responsible for certain tasks in daily work areas are informed by you about their work areas and about their responsibilities. The current residents should be decisive about their work areas in their circles, and their instructions should be as determinative in their work areas as your instructions. At the present time, it concerns Jacobus and your wife Cannibal, who are definitively determined by me personally for their work areas. 1. Your wife Cannibal. Her work area is the entire household and all other activities coinciding with it. In her work area, it should be such that neither a male nor a female life form gives instructions to her, but rather that she is decisive in every respect, unless you, as the first and last authority, make additional or other arrangements. Quetzal will determine the other and additional female life forms, who should work mainly in the household and who are incorporated into all activities of the arrangements of your wife Cannibal, and age differences do not matter. Thus your wife Cannibal has to give her arrangements and directions and has to instruct the trained personnel in their activities to be performed. Poor Jacobus. His work area is house, yard, garden, land, and forest, as well as all other activities related to these. In his work area, it should be such that neither a male nor a female life form gives instructions to him, but rather that he is decisive in every respect, unless you, as the first and last authority, make additional or other arrangements. Quetzal will determine the other and additional male life forms, who should work mainly in his work area, and who are incorporated into all activities of the arrangements of Jacobus, and age differences do not matter. Thus, Jacobus has to give his arrangements and directions, and has to instruct his trained personnel in their activities to be performed. Concerning a representative for cases of sickness and absence, it is determined by me for your wife, Cannibal Maria, the wife of Engelbert. Jacobus Engelbert. In representation of and also in cooperation with the work area leaders, the determinations of the representatives are valid to the same extent and in the same value as the instructions and directions of the work area leaders. In addition, in the special case, Engelbert still appears, who should take over your representation in cases of sickness and absence of your person, but you have to give him the necessary instructions for this. Everything else, in terms of the works to be done and the rules to be drawn up, etc., will be explained to you by Quetzal. Concerning these issues, this is all that I had to explain to you.
I think that this was also enough, but apparently we are now really on the last legs and have no other options left. Very well then, it is just so. But what comes next with my work relating to the mission? You have said nothing else about that.
We will regulate that constantly so that no problems in this connection will arise for you.
Good. But just now, I have found out that you designate my wife, quite originally, as wife Cannibal. I have, unfortunately, forgotten to ask her whether it is fine for her.
Do no worry, I have registered her thoughts.
Then I will say nothing more.
It also is not necessary because her consent is present and given. Declare to your wife Cannibal my dearest and deepest thanks for that. But now, my friend, I have to explain something else further. So namely, something of urgency in reference to the Sohar Center, about which Quetzal will still has to give you a variety of information. In the future time, you should hand over all concerns surrounding the Sohar Center to those who have been determined by us for this task, so at the present time, to Jacobus and your wife Cannibal. Consequently, you should strive hard to lay down the necessary explanations for the new introduction in written form, so that this can be learned in detail by the responsible persons through good study, in order for them to be able to take over their task to the full extent, so that they can give the introductory explanations, etc. themselves after a certain time. But for the time being, it is still your task to carry out the introductions yourself, but only until the time when both of them will be able to take over this task completely. As an approximation, this period might claim about 12 months to 16 months. But after that, you should only act representatively. Henceforth, you should also no longer perform other Sohar Center tasks under any circumstances, except in representative form in the case of the illness or absence of one or both of the responsible persons, so of Jacobus, or of your wife, Cannibal.
And what if one of the two has simply gone to bed?
That is no reason for the fact that they do not fulfill their responsibility. But in special cases relating to this, you can then freely decide whether you want to take over the task of representing, but this should not become the habit. And what I still wanted to explain just now, both of them. So, therefore, Jacobus as well as your wife Cannibal must strive in very strict form for the fact that when they enter the Sohar Center, they truly shut off all their thoughts, which unfortunately has not yet been the case in a satisfactory form. If this is not done by both, they will impair the swinging waves of the Sohar Center, which then, in turn, are reflected in the swinging waves of those reclining and affect them negatively. All Sohar Center users can confirm the difference between the two of them and you at any time because they inevitably have to tell the difference. You can completely shut down all your thoughts in true perfection and, thus, can stay in the Sohar Center for a very long time, without any swinging wave being affected, which is also the reason why, just in another respect and in other values, we can safely approach you. But since your wife Cannibal and Jacobus are not yet able to operate in this manner and are still constantly permeated by thoughts, when they enter the Sohar Center, the center's swinging waves are impaired, and these then settle themselves into those reclining and fill them with restlessness and also impair their exercises. At the same time, true love also plays a very important role, as you do indeed know. Differentiated love may in no wise be present for the individuals who are to be brought into the Sohar Center. An authoritative, sincere love must be uniformly given by the representative and responsible person who is registered by those brought in and whose swinging waves are collected. This gives them the security of peace and security itself, as well as the security of love. It is completely clear to us that neither Jacobus nor your wife Cannibal is capable of radiating this necessary love for one's neighbor in such a measure, as is the case with you and as you are able to radiate it, but they should both strive very quickly and in good measure to develop and acquire this to a certain and decisive extent. Hence, it would be serviceable to the whole thing if you would instruct them in the next few weeks in this extremely important matter. At the same time, it is of great importance for the two that they can be taught by you and leave their usual and their own respective wrong forms of thinking aside. Furthermore, the following rules are still to be clearly noted. 12 sentences, covering 4 points of internal information and guidelines. These, my friend, are the most important facts, which I still had to state in this connection, and which were partially worked out by the High Council.
Give them my very dear thanks. But I also would not like to be lacking in these thanks to you and all others. And I think that I may also express to you the thanks of the whole group for all your tremendous efforts. But since we are already at it, concerning the introductions, which I should still carry out at present, how often must I strive there for the people?
You have enough experience in this relation, such that you can decide this yourself. As I have personally noted, the male persons, as a rule, require an introductory explanation, after which they can then be briefed by those responsible for the Sohar Center. In very few cases, it will be necessary that you take over this additional task yourself and even spend the time there while the first exercises are being completed. In reference to the female persons, however, the case is quite different, which is due to the age-old suppression and lower valuation of women by the men of Earth. For them, it is almost always required that you take over the explanation, which must even be several times in various cases, as you yourself have noted. Depending on the development of your wife Cannibal, this could still also be the case when she is already fully responsible for this task, depending on the sensitivity of the female person concerned, but this will turn out then from case to case. But in isolated cases, this will also be the case with male persons, when they require this in their sensitivity.
Good, that is clear. But what about those who simply want to use the center for the sake of meditation? For example, Madeleine, who has been with us for some time. But also Connie, the daughter of Maria and Engelbert. But in addition, even others?
You know that all those core group members who strive in a sincere form and very seriously for their evolution should have the right and the duty to use the Sohar Center. But to decide this is solely the responsibility of those concerned. It is necessary, however, that the internal group is clear about whether this sincerity and seriousness are actually given, after which it then has to decide if and when the person concerned can use the Sohar Center as a core group member. In the final analysis, however, the persons leading the center in this respect, namely the group's board of directors, have to give the final word on this, and to be sure, both now as well as in later times.
Aha, that is clear. And with that, I should actually have all questions answered by you, which I wanted to know from you.
I, however, am not yet at the end, for I now have to give you some concluding explanations which you should separate, and which are neither determined for the internal group nor for the public.
As you wish, my son.
Also, the individual assessments, which are still to be explained to you by Quetzal after my last remarks, are to be treated in such a manner that they do not become known to the entire internal group or to the public after the report transmissions. These assessments solely apply to the group members concerned, who are to be named in particular.
Okay, I can arrange that. But it will cost me a great deal of effort if I have to separate everything and arrange it in a list.
I will not transmit the transmissions to you in the usual form, but will program our transmission apparatuses in such a way that you can receive the transmissions at will, whereby you are only bound to time to the extent that you should be finished with your work by 3 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, the 11th of June.
That can be arranged.
With that, your problem is already solved for you.
Of course.
Then I can begin with my last remarks, which you should treat as declared in a separate form.
Of course, my son, I have already accepted this. Just fire away with it at last. But wait, first of all, may I still direct another question to you regarding the Giza twerps?
This had to come, but just ask.
Good, thanks. It would interest me and all others what was actually done with all the underground buildings, with the equipment and the ship and the rooms, after you transported the fellows away. Are you allowed to give me information about that?
But of course. All equipment and the ship were completely eliminated by us, as well as the buildings that were erected in the rooms. The rooms themselves were then filled with solid matter, namely with rock and other matter. This was done on the technological basis of the de- and rematerialization.
Then today, practically nothing points to the former existence of these things anymore?
No, for it had to be.
I understand. But did you also fill in all the other corridors and rooms?
No, we let these remain, of course. Only everything that was necessary was destroyed.
Good. This answer is already sufficient. Then you can now bring up the other concerns. Ptah's separate, non-public remarks. Ouch, that is hard, my son, but I will probably have to bite the bullet. It is just that I do not yet know how I should explain all that.
When you give the transmission to read, the situation will arise from it by itself.
Hopefully, my son, hopefully. Man, that is really a blow to the mind.
Unfortunately, it was unavoidable, but it will pass if some reason is brought to application.
The devil knows that something crooked must constantly run, but it probably cannot be any different.
Unfortunately, it does in fact seem to be so. But now, my friend, I must conclude our conversation because I have to attend to my duties again. Be at peace, because the problems are solvable. Till we meet again, my friend.
Till we meet again, Ptah. Till we meet again.
You are very sad.
That is certainly understandable. It already passes, my dear friend. Do not be too upset. Everything will already turn to the better if just a little effort is made toward reason.
Human child, do you actually know what a hell it is?
Such is now burning within you, I know. But nevertheless, we still need to discuss the remaining things. Our time is no longer long, and as it looks, we must perform a leap through time in order still to be able to meet our commitments at the appointed time.
Okay, then go ahead. Moreover, it can only be right for me if I am at home a little earlier. Maybe someone can still pick me up with the car if I can still telephone them early. Unfortunately, I cannot use a radio because I forgot the damn device at home. And also my shooting iron, for I did not know that I would have to go so far away.
You should also carry your weapon with you when we come very close to you. But now, listen carefully to the assessments that I have to explain to you. The new regulations in reference to the internal group are, in accordance with the advice of the High Council, the following. 1. The internal group is composed of 49 members in its final number. The composition of the internal group was planned and formed in its early stages by the members who were meritorious in their other personalities of previous lives and who had made themselves determinant in the circle of truth announcers at very early times, which dates back to several thousands of years. The number of these members appearing at the present time was calculated with 35, some of whom have already come together in the new grouping. But through betrayal, irrationality, ignorance, defamation, demand for might, material craze, and lust, several members were not found in the new values and were much too attached to, confused by, and dependent on the material world of today. This led to discord and strife, greed for power and falsehood, as well as to the neglect of all duties among themselves and toward each other within the group area, as well as in reference to the mission. Departures of unreasonable, faulty, and ignorant group members were the consequence, by which means the entire planning was destroyed, which was prepared and pursued for more than 10,000 years. Through this, all the data of the previous efforts were not only muddled, but also mostly destroyed, requiring a new regulation. It is to be explained to this that it concerns the solution of the last possibility, which is now to be strictly followed and exhausted. Renewed failures, degeneracies, and negations may not result. Otherwise, no other solution of a possibility will be given anymore. So this says that a renewed failure excludes any other possibility and solution, which means that even this last planning would be destroyed without revocation and without a possibility and without a solution of a further planning. This means that in such a case, there would be no further progress in our mission, and this would have to be conclusively aborted and abandoned. 2. The new regulations now appear in this form. The number of the 49 of the internal group, the core group, continues unalterably. Nevertheless, a change occurs in this, which is that due to the absence of various important and predetermined group members, new and still not predetermined and not prepared, members must be drawn in, who must be introduced and initiated into their work areas and areas of duty. This is the duty and task of the already existing core group, which henceforth has to attend to this task in its sole learning responsibility. When, as has been predetermined, various new group members will appear, the internal group will be informed after they appear. Therefore, the group shall be informed when new predetermined group members arrive. In reference to new group members to be appointed as part of the 49, however, all responsibility, determination, instruction, and orientation is incumbent on the members of the internal group. 3. The values of the next incarnation of the still remaining group members of the internal area change in this respect, in that uniformly per group member, a shift of 27 years takes place, whereby 27 years are to be added to the data given earlier. 4. The unannounced longer lifespan of a uniform 12 years per group member becomes null and void, whereby the corresponding impulses provided and transmitted by the central piece in the Sohar Center will be completely eliminated in every single group member in the course of 3 days from the present time. A new, longer lifespan is being built up by impulses through the ongoing meditative exercise times in the Sohar Center. But this is graded in a new form, according to the individual evolutionary progress of the individual group members. So they each have the power in their own hands to form their longer lifespans in their number of hours, days, weeks, months, or years. Thus, the longer lifespan henceforth lies in the discretion of each group member himself or herself, freely according to their own evolutionary progress in their own value. 5. The incarnation data in reference to locality remain the same for the individual group members. Therefore, no shifts occur in relation to this matter. 6. The current task of the internal group members lies in the values of the quickest possible evolution in every respect. On the one hand, this has to result through a strict self-learning activity of all attainable spirit scientific data and matters and, on the other hand, through becoming taught, as well as through the meditative exercises, which must lead to the consequence of the utilization of the powers of consciousness. The good remainder of the task consists of actively exerting oneself for the construction of the site of the center, which should become the actual stronghold of knowledge and wisdom, and the center of the dissemination and teaching of all interests in reference to the creational laws and recommendations, and in reference to knowledge, wisdom, and love, which, however, are already fundamentally mentioned in the values of the naming with the laws and recommendations. 7. The task of the coming time of later incarnations of the individual group members is rooted in the fact that they, through the present preparatory achieving of a higher evolution, become capable of instructively informing Earth humanity in the teaching of the Spirit and in the utilization of the powers of consciousness. But their value should also increase in the way that they achieve teaching forms, in the sense that they become capable of giving advice in all matters, thus enabling them to instruct and advise the mass of Earth humanity in all authoritative matters. Thus, their task in the future time will be to become instructive in all spiritual and consciousness power-based matters, as well as in all worldly matters, in order to stand above all material things and to be advisors for all human life forms, so thus for the forms of government as well as for those human beings living under these. But the group members should not be governors but rather teachers in all interests, so also counselors in advice-giving positions, as this is given by the laws and recommendations in cosmic form. So this also means not to be governing, but rather teaching, which is why the position is designated as a teacher and instructor, which is not to be equated in any way with an executive power and with gain in material respect. Thus, it concerns a leading in spiritual value toward the concepts of justice, love, knowledge, and wisdom, which is why the life form exercising this value is called a spiritual leader. The value of a spiritual leadership, however, lies in the fact that only teaching and advice-giving occurs in one's performance of duty, without any ambition toward commands, thus exercised and given in authoritative modesty. 8. It is given that the ordinal rules, which were already worked out at an earlier time in an advice-giving manner for the internal grouping, are to be recognized in all details, and are to be acquired for application through thorough study, in order to find appropriate use and observance in the future. 9. The leading of the group and all of its interests is to be organized and put into appropriate ordinal rules, according to which also the spreading of the teaching, the entire construction, and the interests can be exercised in definitive and pertinent form. These ordinal rules should be determined in the form of an alliance and should be worked out and drawn up by the internal group. It is still to be explained that the concerns declared now are final and can no longer be subject to change. This is truly the last worked-out possibility of a solution from the High Council, which is definitely the last. But should the factor of negations and disorder appear contrary to expectations, again in the forms as they were given up to now, it would mean the absolute and complete destruction of the entire mission. Nothing could be done or undertaken anymore in order to find a possibility and solution again for the continued existence and the continuation of the mission. Over several millennia, more precisely said, approximately 14,000 years, precipitations of quite malicious values, which endangered all our plans and the whole mission, have entered over and over again. The requisitioned Earth humans, who were prepared for the task and who declared themselves ready for it at earlier times as other personalities, often became disloyal as a result of materialism on the one hand, and as a result of their egoism on the other hand. This, however, may no longer occur in the future. Otherwise, this time, everything will be destroyed up to total annihilation. Hence, it is given that every single group member strives from now on in the very best manner and without any proselytizing of everything. So for the interests of the group and its existence, as well as for the dissemination and expansion of the teaching among and to all those life forms, who have already further developed themselves in their evolution to such an extent that they are interested in it in a sincere form, and even begin to recognize and understand the truth slowly or in already large measures. But given very first in line is the strict and rigorous effort of self-evolution in the highest possible measure, which is fundamentally connected with a strict control based on all individual, personal, and negative characteristics, desires, thoughts, feelings, emotions, and actions, etc. of each group member. Thus, as soon as possible, such negative characteristics must be brought under control, in order gradually to eliminate them completely and replace them with valuable characteristics that are to be newly developed in the sense of fulfilling the laws and recommendations within the scope of the complete teaching of the Spirit. This means very hard work and a new learning time for each group member. That is very clear to us. But as each group member wants to progress in his or her evolution from now on in good measure and wants to be successful, a strict policy must be set up by each individual, and this must be accepted and implemented by the individual.
And how should these look?
These are to be prepared by each group member individually, according to one's sense of understanding and intellect in their own value.
So each group member must break his head over it himself.
That is of correctness. With that, we have met the workload of our current work with your things and now have to go. But it is now necessary, due to the advanced time, that we perform a leap back in time, for otherwise we will not be back in time for the fulfillment of our duty.
The data are already set.
That is good.
Then let us go. Oh, we are already here again. That was fast. Well then, till we meet again, children, and all the best.
Goodbye, my friend. Farewell.
Goodbye, my friend, and pay everyone my dear greetings.
Please do not forget those for me, too.
Okay, how high are we now? It seems damn high to me.
At 40,000 meters.
Well, then take care. I will now jump into the void there. Hopefully, you will turn on the damn converter in time, or whatever it may be. Otherwise, I will just rush into the void and then look at the daces from underneath. It would really make no difference to me. Take care, you two. Maybe it is.